But any of my presentations, if you want the information from it, you couldn't make it to the presentation and not promise you will not beg me for CEUs that I cannot give for watching the recording. You can totally see recordings of past webinars at least, and hopefully I'll start replacing them with some of the live ones if any of them are an improvement over the recordings I have. But I did actually basically make a set of all of my presentations in recorded format. So anyone who, because I've had times when people are like, I've got this kid who's cutting. And the best answer would be, well, let's have the 2-hour presentation on cutting to really understand it. And so it's a way for people, if they want to do that, to do that. Plus, I think on YouTube, you can make it go faster. So if you think I don't talk fast enough, you can fix that. Okay. The evaluation asks if I told you that I have no conflicts of interest or commercial bias. I have no conflicts of interest or commercial bias because my program is, thank you, supported by the state from everyone helping ask them to do that. So it asks, did I tell you this? Did I tell you my program doesn't? And then asks if there is any bias present. They mean commercial bias. So, as I said, this one's going into treatment. And what happens is when you know what the kid needs to do, or the adult, and they know what they need to do, and then they're still not doing it, it gets very frustrating. You very quickly get to the point where what you really want to do is just shake this person vigorously and say, why are you not taking these steps that will help you get better? And so I thought we'd start with just a general understanding of why is it the kids don't necessarily go, oh yes, you are so wise, I will now do everything you say. So a poem. I'm not going to read it out loud. And this applies to the people with anxiety and the people with, the people around them, the families as well. Recognizing how really painful and hard it is to deal with all this, which is why they keep doing the exact opposite of what they should do. And we can see it making a person get worse and worse and worse. And it gets very frustrating, but trying to understand where that comes from. So as I said, the general overview of anxiety, real fast, comes from multifactorial. I hate it when people are like, so tell me why, as if I can put it on a fortune cookie. Like there's the academic pressure, the family pressure, the societal pressure. Social media is definitely having a great time with it. I have a whole presentation about how toxic and dangerous social media is. And then we had this lockdown and we all became totally dependent on tech. I want to point out that does not make it any less evil. It's just an evil that we are totally dependent on. I mean, it's sort of like if someone's in an abusive relationship, but then their abuser is putting them through grad school. It's like, okay, that does not make everything okay. But you can kind of see why you might keep using it. Okay. Tons of anxiety, ever increasing, and treatment trailing far, far behind. Recognizing that anxiety itself is something that helps you stay alive. If you had no anxiety, you get squished by a bus or eaten by a bear or something. And it doesn't even always feel bad. Mild anxiety is, I'm ready to go. You feel revved up and good. It's only when it starts getting into moderate, severe, or you stay there indefinitely that it becomes a problem. And the problem results in having dysfunctional anxiety reactions. The part of your brain that is designed to keep you alive in the face of threat starts going off all the time when it doesn't need to. Either there's nothing threatening there, or it's reacting to anything that was nearby when there was a real threat in the past, or it had you totally freak out over something that is relatively minor as a problem. And the way you can tell that this is happening is because a person is more likely to be having physical symptoms, because physical symptoms really kick in for the moderate to severe anxiety. So if you're getting a stomach ache, that would be because your body's going, we might need to run away from the bear, so let's just short circuit the GI system. So another thing I didn't put on here is also the people who just are anxious all the time, even if there's no trigger, because the brain, it does what, it gets real good at what it does a lot of. So if it's going to, I feel threatened all the time, after a while, it's like, how about we just live here rather than having to make that long trip? And so it will just park in the, something bad is probably going to happen anytime now, feeling all the time. There's a variety of assessment tools that you can request if you want, and emphasize that diagnosis, when diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, rests not on just being anxious, but on having clinically significant distress or dysfunction. So the people who want to go and start whole web pages about how terrible psychology is, because they'll call like phobias a mental illness, and you think a person who's afraid to fly is mentally ill, call it whatever you like. If they want to get some treatment to be able to get on a plane, it's really nice that there's a diagnosis that would enable someone to bill for that time, because people don't want to do that for free. So we also want to point out that even before someone's diagnosed, well, we want to do something because they already are. It's the automatic reaction. If something is threatening or something is painful, you respond to it. The problem is the way you respond. I mean, if it's a lion, running away from it is great. If it's a math test, running away from it is not a long-term life strategy. So you want to recognize that whatever your gut reaction is to anxiety is designed around predators, not around modern life, and therefore ends up being maladaptive to the modern world. So things like running away from it, you know, or the long-term running away, which is ignore the issue. Now I feel really stressed when I think about math tests. So when I'm playing my video games, I don't feel stressed at all. Great, but it does not help when the math test comes around. Avoiding the triggers, that's a really, really, really common one. I mean, that's an automatic. If something hurts you, you go away from it. And if you go away from it loudly enough, everyone around you will start helping you avoid it because they don't want to deal with that. I grew up with a phobia of spiders. I lived in a world where if there was a spider, I had to have a huge reaction. I also lived in a world where I never saw a spider because everyone would make sure that there were no spiders around and would come and take care of it for me. So the other way to run away without actually leaving the room is just to shut down the emotion. And there's nothing healthy that shuts down the emotion. Self-harm will, substances will. So we want to make sure that people are recognizing that if you don't deal with it, you're prone to having a very unhealthy outcome otherwise. The other thing that people will do, because anxiety is all about feeling helpless. It's really awful to feel like I'm threatened and there's nothing I can do. And so feeling out of control makes people respond around issues of control. One thing they might do is get very ritualized, you know, where it's like, okay, I'm going to have everything be exactly in its right place. And then I feel in control. And I can't do anything about mom and dad fighting downstairs, but I can make sure my teddy bears are lined up from tallest to shortest on my bed every single morning. And so that's one response. The other is when people feel out of control, they will frequently act out angrily. Lots of times when people are angry, it's really because they're afraid or anxious. The other thing that we'll see a lot of is, I can't control this, but I'm really good at that. Why are you pointing out at this so much? And you see that all the time when it's like, okay, you need to challenge your anxiety. Yes, yesterday, didn't you see that I did that? Yeah, last week, did you see that I did that? It's like, yes, but today. Oh, you're ignoring what I did yesterday. It's like, yeah, because you're ignoring what you need to do today. So we'll either focus just on the areas of their life where they don't have anxiety, or on their past successes rather than their next challenge. The other thing they'll do is completely abandon all control and say it's everyone else's job to make me feel better. That's why I never saw a spider when I was growing up. You know, that, well, you know that I get upset if there's loud voices, so it's your fault that I'm upset right now because you raised your voice. So getting them to recognize that, no matter what they're doing, even if they got a healthy one, you're like, go for a jog or something like that. If it's the only one you got, it's not going to be healthy because you need to have a variety. One thing that we all do that contributes to people's anxiety, our own and everyone else's, is we pretty much universally live in a world with two baskets. One basket, we keep all the things that we do, and we do them because they're easy. How do I know it's easy? Because I did it. I do the things, they're easy. Easy, do, can, synonymous, same word. The other basket are the things that I don't do because I can't do them because they're too hard. And we do this all the time. Think about all the things that you worked your butt off to learn how to do. And once you can do it, you're like, oh yeah, it's no big deal. You know, the moment it becomes canned, you start to define it as easy rather than, no, actually I worked really hard to get here. You know, and the problem with this is because people tend to equate those sets. When a kid says, I can't do something, and we come along and say, yes, you can do it. From their point of view, we just picked it up and put it in the wrong basket. You know, it's as if we came up and said, it's easy. It does not help that lots of times people come up and say it's easy. But even if you don't, they'll, if you just say, yes, I know you can do this, what they hear is that we're saying, yeah, it's easy. So what we need to do is help everybody recognize that most of the world is a big basket of hard things that we have to do anyway and that we can do. Partially by recognizing that the word can is not a momentary verb. It's a lifelong verb. If I say you can do this, I don't mean that you can do it now. I mean that it is within the realm of possibility that you can develop the skills to be doing it in the future. Whereas can't is a very, I will never be able to do this. So one thing I always recommend is helping people rephrase. Anytime someone says, I can't do it, say, it's very hard for you to do that. Because can't is pretty much a never happening. Whereas hard is a might never happen. Or maybe with work it will. And again, we want to be able to retrospectively take credit for that work. I mean, think about it. If someone says, I can't do that, and then they decide to try really hard, and then they do it, the reaction that they and everyone around them has is, see, told you, you made a big deal out of nothing. Whereas if they say, it's really hard for me to do that, and then they work really hard and they do it, they get high-fived and congratulated. So we want to recognize doing hard things is a thing. And I got to figure out where I can stand with this, make that noise. Yeah. So, cognitive behavioral therapy is based on the universal understanding that your emotions, your feelings, which also are expressed through physical sensations, and your thoughts, whatever's running through your head, and what your behavior is, are all related to each other. And they feed off of each other in whichever direction you're going. So if you start off and you are afraid and I can't do this because I'm just a broken person who's anxious all the time, so I'm going to run away and get someone else to do it for me, which really reinforces, if she's doing it for me, then she knows I can't do it too. So that really reinforces that I can't, which makes me feel even more afraid about the fact that I might have to do it. And it goes round and round in both directions and gets worse and worse and worse. What we're trying to do is change that and try and make it work for good. Now, it's a cycle that also happens with the people around you as well, not just within the anxious person. And this is key to recognizing when you really want to just scream at the parents. What's going on here? Okay. You start with the kid has a challenge and they're like, oh, save me. Okay. At which point they're begging for help. They are currently in pain. And it is the nature of adults generally to not want children to be in pain. Well, some, but the ones in school and in families generally want their kids to not be in pain anymore. And so they don't come in and rescues the kid. Now they say, okay, you don't have to do a speech in front of the class. You can just write a paper. Or yes, you can stay in bed and not go to school today. Or here, let me kill that spider for you so you don't have to deal with it. They come in, they rescue it, and everybody feels better. Recognize it's not just the kid. Everybody is like, yes. The kid is relieved of their anxiety and the adult got to be the hero and got to do the adult thing that is what you're supposed to do when you're an adult. So everybody feels great. The problem is the kid is learning from this process because they keep doing that. We can't get them to stop doing this learning thing. They're learning all the time. It's very annoying. And what they're learning in this situation is you were right to be afraid. That is very frightening. That is a threatening thing. You can't do that. You do need someone to rescue you. You can't possibly be expected to do this by yourself. Good luck next time they're facing that challenge or any other similar challenge. So it goes round and round and round, and we got to recognize that a lot of the adult reaction is because, yeah, it feels good to help the kid. And it feels right, and it feels cruel not to. So what we want to be doing is addressing all three sides of this to help it spin in a positive reaction instead. So on the feeling side, we want activities or medications that will reduce the physical symptoms of the anxiety, because physical symptoms of anxiety are anxiety. That's how your body tells you that you're feeling anxious. Okay, so the idea that the physical is like some fake thing that your body is trumping up because it's anxious. No, that is how your body tells you that you're anxious. For very young kids, they don't have the words. You know, it's like they don't know how to express that they feel concern and anxiety about their future because their parents are fighting all the time. All they know is that they get tummy rumblies when mommy and daddy are fighting too much. So things that they can do to bring those symptoms down. We also want them to recognize when the thoughts are feeding into it and confront those thoughts, like switching, can't, too hard. You know, this is hard. That thing I'm afraid is going to happen is not likely to happen. And then the behavior is the real hard one. Don't run away. At the very least, run away slower. Maybe walk away. Maybe pause a little bit before you run away. And ultimately, you want to start actually moving towards the stressor. I've talked to some kids who've done some really hardcore work on it, like on the OCD unit. And what they'll do is the moment they start to feel themselves veering away from something, they don't even know what they're veering away from. They just get kind of a revulsion feeling. They'll stop and look for what was it that I was reacting to. I'm going to move closer to it, figure out what it was that I was triggered by. So step one, you got to recognize when you're anxious. So this is step one in helping kids get better at this, is helping them name it. You know, if they're having stomach aches at the same time every day, not just brushing it off, but saying, hey, I think your body's trying to tell you maybe you're anxious. Well, maybe you didn't have breakfast, whatever. But helping them recognize when they are having anxiety and helping them recognize different levels of it. Because for lots of people with anxiety, they're just one size fits all level. I mean, the only thing a 3 is pretty much a 10 on the way. And so helping them recognize that, no, their anxiety comes in different sizes. And you'll do different things to respond to it at different sizes. One thing is, if it's fairly low, you can just hang out and let yourself feel a little bit anxious. You do not need to run away screaming from a low level of anxiety. I mean, if it's always going to escalate into a 10, then yes, that's why you wouldn't want to run away from it. But if you just sit with it and you notice that if I'm not running, it doesn't grow, I can just stay with it and it doesn't get higher than a 3, then that can help them feel more in control. I have one girl where asking her to rank her anxiety, she was like not going to school hardly at all. Like, so how anxious are you on everything? I'm like, okay, in English class, well, I'm anxious. Okay, let's call that a 5. What about science? Oh, science is worse. It's a 9. Okay, what about math? Math's a 15. And she thinks she won because she put a 15 on my 10-point scale, but now I'm cool because now she can rank her triggers. She can line them up. And once you line them up, you don't eat all the things on the table at once. You start with the easy ones. So I turn to her and say, okay, this week, don't go to math. Don't even try. Go to English every day. Go to science. Try to stay at least 10 minutes so that it's broken down into steps. And the fact that she's not sitting in English terrified of math helps her be less anxious in English. And once English is like no problem and science is what English used to be, now we're bringing in more and more and more and having it do it in a stepwise way. When kids talk about triggers, we need to get that word back from them. They have taken that word and made it be all kinds of things that word was not meant to be, okay? One thing kids think, trigger is the magic go away button. If I say that triggers me, that's their way of saying, I have veto power over every adult, every human being in my environment. You are not allowed to say that. You are not allowed to think that. You are not allowed to point at that. That is not allowed to exist. And it is your job to protect me from it and make it go away so I never see it at all. That's not what a trigger is. A trigger is not your get out responsibility free card. It's your to-do list. And so what we want to do is get them to recognize that, no, a trigger is like you've got this really annoying control freak following you around all day, bossing, saying, okay, you've got rules now. Okay, your rule is that you cannot use a bathroom in public and you cannot chew in front of other people. And if a door slams, you are required to curl up in a ball and cry for 10 minutes. And if a spider shows up unannounced, you have to run 10 feet to the side and scream. Those are your rules. You have to follow them. Now, anyone would start after a while saying, I don't want to follow all these rules. And so what you want to do is say, okay, let's look at that rule. Is it a rule that you want to live with? Or do you want to learn how to break it going forward? What's your life like with this limit? Now, very often they'll say, oh, it's fine. Say, okay, if everybody around you stops rearranging the universe to protect you from it, what's your life like? What's your life going to be like in the future if you don't have everybody else doing that? You know, like running away from spiders, no problem. Everybody kills all the spiders for me. I never see a spider. But then I grow up and it's a little bit more pathetic to ask other people to kill my spiders. And there's times like, did you know those suckers can get into cars? And if you're driving down the highway and one decides it's going to do the little dangly thing right in front of your face, and your rule is that you are absolutely required to run 10 feet to the side and scream, you're in a bit of a spot now. So you might be like, okay, I may still often be upset when this happens, but I want to be able to say whether I'm going to cry or not. You know, if a door slamming is going to bother me, okay, the door slamming might always bother me, but I want to be able to have some say in what I do when a door slams in my presence. So if I need to follow it, at least for now, if it's, you know, okay, I'm not going to be breaking it anytime soon, then what do you need to do to be able to follow it? If your rule is that when the fire alarm goes off, you are going to be completely incapacitated, then who do you need to talk to? What do you need to ask for? Recognize whatever you're asking for are requests for favors. They are not obligations of other people because it's your anxiety to work on. So you go and you might ask the teacher, could you please let me know if there's a fire drill scheduled today? And if you happen to forget or no one scheduled the small smoking, you know, the popcorn burn down the hall and it goes off anyway, I would like you to know that I'm likely to have this reaction. It would be very helpful if you could be supportive of me during it. They should be able to be in that conversation. They might not be able to have the conversation, but it shouldn't be, okay, I'll take care of it. I'll tell all the teachers for you. There's one kid who was very anxious and worried that they were going to throw up in class. He's like, okay, so you're going to have a puke bin next to you just in case that happens. And the nurse was like, yeah, he's going to class now. I go there every morning. I put the puke bin next to his desk. I'm like, why are you doing that? Make him get his own puke bin. He can move the garbage can himself and not have it be everyone else doing more work than the person is to manage their anxiety. And once it becomes more work to actually accommodate the rule, they start reassessing how much they want to be following these rules. And then becomes the process, which is a long, slow, painful process of learning how to break the rule. It's not a matter of, okay, I've decided I'm not going to be scared of that anymore. It's, okay, I've decided that I'm going to work on managing the fact that, yeah, my adrenal system still thinks that every single spider on the planet is out to kill me. So you want to develop skills to calm yourself, break it into steps. And lots of times kids need help with that, you know, because if it's like, I'm scared of spiders, there's no steps there. You say, okay, well, would you rather be looking, if you hold out your hand, would you rather I put a picture of a spider in it or a spider in it? And you're like, okay, pictures of spiders are not as bad as actual spiders. Videos are worse than still pictures. Have you noticed that? It's the way they move. Anyway, so you break it into steps and you work on the easier towards the harder. But we really got to recognize that this is really hard and praise the kid all along the way. Because what most kids go through is they can work their butt off for the future goal of maybe if they are incredibly strong, their reward might be that people ignore them and pretend that they were normal all along. They're not very likely to be getting praised for it. And that is a prime shame. They really ought to. I mean, they're so trained into looking at everything as just a failure. You know, that girl, she came back the next week. I'm like, so how'd it go? Did you go to science school? Yeah. Okay, how long did you stay? 10 minutes. That was your goal. I still have to leave. You know, that's all to focus on. I had an adult seeing me who has severe social anxiety. Like she works with just like 5 coworkers, and if they all show up on the same day, she's going to have a very rough day because having 5 people that she knows very well in the room with her is overwhelming. I asked her if she ever did anything brave. She said, yeah, I went ziplining. I'm like, oh, how was it? Oh, it was really fun. I'm like, okay, then it wasn't brave, okay? Doing fun things. Doing something that scares someone else might be showy, but it's not brave. Later on, she mentions in passing that her cousin really wanted to go to this concert and no one else would go with her. And so she took her cousin to the concert because the cousin really wanted to see this concert for her birthday. I'm like, wow. So like you went to like one of those little coffee house concerts? She goes, no, it was in a stadium. Like, so you were in a room with like 50,000 people. Why did you not mention that when you were brave? She's like, well, because I was crying the whole time. I'm like, did you leave? I mean, the fact that you showed up at all, brave, already checked that box. She stayed for the whole damn concert, and it didn't occur to her to list that as something she did that was brave. Because after all, there's 50,000 other people there who are scared, therefore it must not be a brave thing. So step 2, once they know what they're going to try to be working on, how do they deal with those physical symptoms? Well, fortunately, the same way the brain can tell the heart to race, the heart tells the brain to get scared. So if you can reverse the physical symptoms, it can turn the emotion down a notch. You know, we do this automatically. If you're like on the verge of tears and you're so upset and your face is red and hot and puffy, you go and you get a cold face cloth and you wipe your face. And now you don't feel so hot. You don't feel so on the verge of tears. You know, it's not like a magic cloth that erases all the grief, but it takes the emotion down a few notches. So same thing. You want to ask them what their physical symptoms of anxiety are, which can be hard because they're used to the moment they mention an anxiety related physical symptom, that means we're going to say, oh, it's not real. It's not real stomachache. You know, next time a teacher tells you that a kid has a stomachache, but it's not a real stomachache, I just always hope that they'll come asking for Tylenol for their stress headache. So you can say, oh, it's not a real headache. You don't need Tylenol for that. It's just stress. Because everyone knows, no, a stress headache really hurts. You know, anxiety, a psychogenic stomachache is a real stomachache. You got a stomach, it aches, only prerequisites you need for a real stomachache. So if your stomach is what gets to you, find ways to soothe your stomach. If your heart rate goes up, for just about everyone, you find ways to slow your heart rate. You know, generally your heart rate goes up and your breathing gets fast. So if you breathe slow and deeply, especially if the exhale is longer than the inhale, that slows the heart rate and tricks the brain's like, huh, I thought I was scared, but I breathe shallow and fast when I'm scared. I'm breathing slow and deep now. So maybe I'm not as scared as I thought I was. If they get cold, you get them something warm. If they get hot, you get something cold. If their muscles tense up, do something to stretch. Exercise or movement can really help, especially if they do rigorous exercise first thing in the morning. It like resets a lot of things throughout the body. But for some people, because this is a system designed to get you to run away from the bear, you know, I'm sitting there taking a test and the teacher walks by and I'm terrified of the teacher. And the teacher walks by and I'm really scared. And then the teacher continues on. The threat has passed, but I cannot shake the fear because some part of my brain is saying, you did not run. You must still be close to the bear. If I get up, go get a drink of water and come back, then my brain's like, oh, okay, you've relocated. You must have gotten away from the predator. We're okay. So for some people, you don't want it to be, yes, run away, it'll make you feel better. But for some people, some physical movement will be necessary to help reset that part of their brain. Similarly, distraction, different from avoidance. You want to get your brain to get off that gerbil wheel of what terrible thing's going to happen by getting it someplace else to go temporarily. Not going there permanently. That would be the avoidance. So you have it for a limited set amount of time. And then you have them check how anxious were you at the beginning and now how anxious are you at the end? And see if it's going down. If it has, then you might go back to your activity or you might do it a little bit longer. Having a very precise amount, not precise amount of time, but having a limited amount of time. You know, my anxious girl in the school, they would tell her if she felt anxious, she should take a break, go to the bathroom, and come back when she felt better. Well, when she's 20, she's got an anxiety disorder. What do you expect? And then they get really irritable when she'd be gone for like half an hour. It's like, well, you told her to come back when she feels better and she doesn't. I mean, she's always anxious. So So you want it to be a very specific round trip. It's like go someplace. It's like, okay, take this down to the office and come back. Or go get a drink of water and come back. If you can get them to occupy their minds, so they're not just perseverating on what they're scared of the whole time, you know, like, can you go down the hall and tell me what the poster at the end of the hall says? Because I need to know what date that thing is happening. Something like that, that will occupy their mind a little bit. And on the cognitive side, we want to help them challenge those negative thoughts. Through all of this, we got to get them to recognize none of this is going to make it be a zero. We don't want it to be a zero. We want it to go down a little. And then we want you to just chill out and hang out with mild anxiety. So distress tolerance is huge. The ability to just go ahead and feel bad without it being a crisis that must be annihilated before you can function. I mean, if you can only be in class, if your anxiety is zero, how do you take a test? You know, the moment someone calls your name, your anxiety is gonna, everyone does. That's called waking up out of your daydreams to answer the person's questions. So we get them to collect whatever coping strategies work for them. They should try out lots of different things. Try them when you are not panicking. That's not a learning moment. So they should try them out when they're calm or maybe mildly stressed. And be constantly adding more in. You know, one doesn't work anymore, get rid of it, get new ones. You want your own personal list. It should not be kept in your head because you will not be able to access it when you're anxious. You need to have it written down somewhere external or have the people around you able to gently remind you, hey, you told me that when you're acting like this, I should tell you to go get a drink of cold water or something like that. But I like having them on cards because then you can add and take out without it becoming a chaotic mess. It also makes it really easy to sort and categorize them. Be like, okay, these I do at home, these I can do in school, these I can do in this class, this I can do there. And you can quantify it. So it could be, okay, when you need to leave class, do 3 coping cards first. And then if you still need to leave, okay, then you go to, you know, nurse or guidance or wherever, and you tell them what you were doing. And did it work at all? If it didn't work at all, maybe you should get rid of them and get some new cards because they will come and say it didn't work. Now, that's always that. I love it when someone said, I've tried all the coping strategies and none of them work. Just like 11. I'm like, really? You've participated in every possible human activity known to mankind, because that's what a coping strategy is anything. It can be brush your hair, it can be pet your dog, it can be go for a walk or play tennis or watch a video. No, not that video, it didn't work. Watch it. Have you watched every single thing on YouTube? Because any one of them could be the coping strategy that will help you. So well, I'll start by saying, when you say it doesn't work, what do you mean by work? Are you expecting it to shut it down and make it an off switch? No, we want it to be a volume knob. It's kind of cool, but when I prescribe meds, I tell people, I do not want this to work 100%, because the point of anxiety is learning how to manage anxiety. If you take something that takes away the anxiety, that's kind of like saying, I'm going to teach you to ride a bike. Step 1, get rid of that bike. You know, you're not going to learn how to ride it. So we want them to get that anything that helps a little is worth recognizing. You know, I want to be able to be proud of you for going to 10 minutes of science. I would like you to feel like your anxiety going from an 8 down to a 5 is also something to view as an accomplishment. We both sides need to value incremental change more. There's also the possibility when they say something doesn't work, that it doesn't work because it might not work for everyone. At which point it's like, okay, I gave you a sampler pack to start with. You now need to go and fill the box yourself. It's kind of like if you've got like an older teen or young adult who keeps going and standing in front of the fridge and they don't really feel like eating any of the stuff there and they complain that there's nothing in there that's good. At some point you tell them to go shopping themselves already. You know, it's your fridge. If it's empty, that's on you. If your toolbox doesn't have anything in it that is satisfying, and it really should be that you think of or even look in a box. Sometimes you keep everything in a box or look at the list. And it might be that, yeah, this day, this feels like it'll help. This day, this feels like it'll help. You know, you want to be able to look and say, okay, what's appealing? Same as when you look in the fridge. No, that's too sweet. No, that's too crunchy. Okay, yeah, that is satisfying. What I need today might be different days. So same thing. Your box, you fill it with things. Our job is to help advocate for them being able to have access to the things that they find important. There's all kinds of lovely posters out there about it. I love 50 Ways to Take a Break. But like I said, I really like the cards because they're easier to modify and add and take away from. Now, challenging negative thoughts. This is more conversational. And it can be hard because what you want to do is when our automatic reaction when someone says this horrible thing is going to happen, especially when it's a ridiculous horrible thing, like if I give that speech, everyone's going to laugh at me. We automatically say, of course, they're not going to laugh at you. Instead, you say, okay, and then what happens? You know, the kid who needed the puke, he'd never thrown up in class. It's like, oh, I guess stomach ache, and I'm worried I might throw up in class. And instead of saying, not likely, you say, okay, and then what happens? Well, it goes everywhere. Ooh, yeah. How about you have a garbage can next to you? And then it will be less terrible, So we want them to unpack what is the worst case scenario. Everything that they list, whether it's my heart will be racing, my throat will be dry, or whether it will be everyone will laugh at me and no one will ever speak to me again, or I'll fail that test and then I'll never go to college, whatever things they have them list out everything. By the definition of reality, everything they list will either be something that happens or something that doesn't happen. It's just the way reality works, okay? So to find out whether what they just listed is more likely to be in the doesn't happen section, help them figure that out, seek information. It's amazing how scared you can get yourself off of not knowing what's going to happen, because that's part of the anxiety. I was tied into knots because I was going on a trip with my family, and my husband and a couple of kids were going to fly, and me and a kid were going to fly, and we're going to meet up and continue. And they had a connection on their flight. And I just could not shake the image of standing there at the meeting place, and they didn't make it to the meeting place, and I didn't know what to do. And I'm just tied in the knots. And someone said, well, how long is their connection? I'm like, that would be a good thing to know. So I go and I look it up. They got like 4 freaking hours to connect. I'm like, okay, yeah. He might have a hard time managing this, but he's not that incompetent. He can do this just fine. And I felt a lot less anxious. So seek the information. Question, how plausible is it that this will be a problem? Note when you're having cognitive distortions, mind reading or black and white thinking, so on. Remind them of times in the past when they did a similar thing and the terrible thing didn't happen. And keep reminding yourself that it's unlikely. The other thing that you can do, that gets into the happens thing. But the main thing is to convey to them that the anxiety gremlin sitting on your shoulder whispering nasty futures at you, they're a liar. They are trying to scare you, all kinds of stuff that is just not going to happen. Now, you don't tell them these things. You ask them questions so that they will come to these answers themselves. Okay, you don't want to be saying, oh, but no one ever laughs. So you said, oh, how many times have you been in a class where kids have laughed out loud at the person who's speaking? Or, have you gone and looked up what the connection is? Partially because you want them to be active participants, because so much of anxiety is lack of control. The more active participation they have, the more in control they feel intrinsically. But it's also any information that comes into your head yourself is a lot stronger than anything that someone else puts in there. It's like when someone's telling a joke and they kind of pause and everyone thinks the punchline before they say it. How much funnier that is than when they just say it. Now, a lot of what they're afraid of totally could happen. Okay. There, the anxiety is saying it rolled into that is, and it'll be the end of the world. You won't be able to cope with it. So if it's something that might happen, I get up to give a speech, my legs will be shaking and my throat will feel dry. Yep, that's entirely possible. I think you're strong enough to still be able to stand up and speak, even with shaky legs and a dry throat. You are stronger than you thought. You could prepare, bring some water so that you've got something to drink. If you're worried that you'll forget something, write it down and bring it with you. You can take steps to prepare. I might throw up everywhere. Okay, well, put a bin next to you so that it would contain it. Okay, remind yourself that you are stronger than you thought, and feel proud of what you've done before. Because again, pride is not something that comes naturally, because no one ever tells kids, I'm so proud of you. So what we want to do for this one, to encourage this one, is to be proud of them. Be proud of them as hard as you can. Admire them for whenever they've managed to do things, so that they get the idea of, oh yeah. I hate it when a kid does something and they're like, see, I told you could. It's like, way to minimize their work, say, oh, you worked really hard and you accomplished it. That's wonderful. Rather than, oh, see, I told you it wasn't that bad. And then step 3 is you pull these together and have them actually do the scary thing. You break the triggers into steps. Like I said, and I've even got a tool that basically is just boxes. Even though it's a little awkward to write them from the bottom of the page to the top and it's progressively smaller boxes, it's really good to have the steps you're going to do written in a stairwise format like that. So that they see that, okay, yeah, right now I'm just worried about doing this one. Eventually I might be doing that one, but right now we're just focused on this one. And then once I land there, it's kind of evident that I'm not supposed to live there forever, because now there's a step beyond that and beyond that. And so doing it that way. So they're going to, with support, person right there, helping coach them on their coping strategies, they approach them from the easier to the harder. You want them to be setting goals, always focusing just on the immediate steps. Some distant goals can be inspiring, others can be really overwhelming. So you got to kind of figure out what it is for the kid. You know, if you tell a kid, if you work really, really hard to get yourself through the door into the school, you know, you're going to be able to come for all day. Like, that's not really an incentive. I mean, let alone, you know, if you can come to school and you do the school, I know you want to cling to mommy, but if you can let go of mom and you come to school and you get through school, you can go to college where you'll live thousands of miles away and not see mom for months. And that is not necessarily going to inspire the kids. So sometimes it can be, you know, you want to be a doctor, you need to be doing this, but sometimes you really want to focus on what the next step is. And to keep from lingering too long, you also point at the previous step and say, hey, remember how hard it was to do that? This thing that they're now so preoccupied with trying to get you to not expect them to do the next step. You're like, hey, remember how you were saying this about that step 3 weeks ago? That now you're barely thinking about when you do it. It is really hard, though, to know when have they worked hard enough for the day? You know, how do you keep their eye on the next step without them feeling like you're just dismissing all the hard work that got them to their current step? And that's where the DBT lineup, you're doing the best you can, and you need to do better. Is there? Like, yes, I'm very impressed by what you've done, and you need to do better. It's not that you haven't done enough. It's that you've done wonderful things so far, and now you're going to go on and do more wonderful things. You've all seen the SMART goals, right? The mnemonic from, I mean, it's not as bad as some mnemonics. I hate mnemonics. Anyway, one thing is to point out, when we talk about control, we're not talking about shut down and make it go away. We mean have an impact on it, okay? And the reason why I draw the circle of control with this dotted line here is because anxiety folks tend to really make that line very, very permeable. They love to drag things that don't belong into one circle and push things in the other. So what they will try to put in what they can control is everybody else's behavior. You know, you should not be raising your voice because loud voices bother me. You know that I don't like that. Why did you bring it in the room? It's like, no, their actions are their actions. You do not get to control those. What they'll do at the same time is they'll take things that they can control and shove it out into, well, no, I can't help it. When I'm scared, I'm going to have this horrible emotional reaction and I'm going to be totally incapacitated by it. Say, well, I mean, no, that's something you can control. Not shut down and stop, but you can have an impact on it. You can say, yes, I'm going to be upset by this, but I'm not necessarily going to have a total meltdown. Or maybe I'll have a meltdown, but maybe next time I'll have less of a meltdown, and so on. When it comes to anxiety, you really want to narrow and get specific on the goal. And the measurable, the important thing with measurable is you have it be a partial, like 10 minutes of science is the measurable goal. Because what they've heard all their lives is that anything short of 100%, you're a loser, you're broken, you're incapable. And so saying, your goal is to do this half the time. Your goal is to run away less often than you did before. That is something that we're going to celebrate you achieving and build on, rather than, yep, no credit for you until you are completely doing everything the same as everyone else. I mean, there's a reason why people don't only cheer at the finish line of the marathon, because no one would make it to the finish line if they didn't get the encouragement along the way. So again, with the achievable, we want to make sure that we're focusing on achievable things, not the end goal that is totally impossible on day one. And with relevant, highlight what the intrinsic benefits are, because a lot of it is like, why should I do this? Like, well, part of it is so you'll feel better, part of it is so you'll be able to go and do more things. That's where it's like, okay, how is your life impacted by letting anxiety drive the bus? How is anxiety keeping you from doing things that you want to do? And then you do have time limits on it. We're going to be checking in and seeing how this is going, rather than, yeah, come back when you feel better. Have it be, no, we're going to, check and see how it's going. Now, medications. When it comes to meds, people get very, very, it's like they take all the negative thoughts they have about psych pouring into the meds too. Starting with the fact that they will go and Google stuff. Please don't Google stuff. Everything practically is off label for kids because the FDA blesses things that have extensive studies done on it, and people do not sign their kids up to be guinea pigs. I mean, I did a couple times because I'm me, but for the most part, they don't. And so the way the FDA gets it is that people will use what information is out there, what they know is safe, what they know is plausible, and they will carefully, start using it. Standards of care come about 10 years ahead of the FDA. And then people start reporting back how it's going so far. And then the FDA will eventually say, oh, okay, and you'll see what things. I had a psychopharm teacher got really mad at me for doing a paper on an experimental med instead of an established one. So I took great pleasure in talking in the paper about the first psych med I gave was Clonidine back in like mid-90s. It was finally approved by the FDA for ADHD in 2011. I listened to that one because she talked about Clonidine all the time. It was clearly one of her favorite go-tos. Like, yeah, well, that one wasn't effective. But anyway, there are two kinds of meds, as you know. There are meds you take every single day and you don't expect it to do anything, and you don't feel it kick in or anything. But by doing it every single day over time, it will lower your baseline level of anxiety. And then there are the take it when you need it PRN meds. Okay. It's really, PRN meds are really not that wonderful for anxiety because a lot of them are just way too effective. And like I said, we do not want something that turns the anxiety off, especially for kids, because we're trying to get them to work really, really hard to develop coping skills. And then they take a PRN that works and they're like, why are you making me do that when I could just push this button and it's gone? It's like an adult can come home from a stressful day and say, yeah, I could walk the dog for half an hour and feel better, or I could just go straight to the liquor cabinet and feel better in a few minutes. But an adult, hopefully, is a little bit more in touch with, yeah, there be dragons. That's not a good answer. Whereas with the kids, it really undermines their interest in doing the work for other coping strategies. There are times when PRNs do totally make sense. Like you've worked really hard all day and you are exhausted and you'd like to go to sleep now or just chill out for the evening, but your brain will just not, it's on fire and will not stop. Okay, yeah, getting it to shut down, especially for sleep. Or if they are having such a global panic attack, they tried doing some exposure, it did not go well. And if we do not shut this sucker down as soon as possible, they will never do exposure again, but they will be so afraid of it happening again. That would be another good time for PRN. But the problem is, if they've ever had one, they know they exist and they will come and ask. And it's really kind of impossible to say no because it's like you're going, I got something that can help you, you can't have it. And they're now just going to get more and more anxious. The number of nurses who've learned that it's not right to say, well, it says you take this when you've got an anxiety that's high. You don't look like you're that anxious yet. Well, just give them 5 minutes now, So what you need to do, though, is recognize, and the 5 minutes is not that they're going to fake it. Well, sometimes, but generally it's because now lack of access to it is going to crank up their anxiety. But what you want to do is you don't have to give it very quickly. Take a little bit of time, but also say to them, okay, I need to write, I've got paperwork here. I need to put down what level your anxiety is. And you know what the anxiety level is. And then you get the med and you give it to them and you have them reassess their anxiety, like practically before they swallow, within the first 5 minutes. It will be a lower number, not because they lied or exaggerated, but because help is on the way alleviates a lot of your anxiety. Same as if you've got a pounding headache and you don't have any Tylenol and you're groping and groping and groping and it's pounding, and then the moment your hand touches a bottle of, oh, yes, I do, it pounds a little bit less because help is on the way. That's just a natural human thing. But what you want to do is when they reassess it and their 8 is now a 5, point this out to them and say, okay, the pill I gave you is still sitting intact in your stomach. I just want to make sure that you know, going from 8 to 5, you did that. That's your accomplishment. Don't you dare give your credit away to a stupid little pill. Okay, you did that. You have power that you don't realize you have. It is powerful. It is way faster, and it is yours. You didn't need to wait for anyone to hand it to you and fill out forms. You may well still need the pill to make the 5 go any lower. Make it go down to a 2 or 0. It might be a negative number depending on what the pill is. Who knows? Might be drooling on the desk all afternoon, but you still want them to notice that, yes, I did this. I can do things. If it's a daily med, I hate it when they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm fine since I started the Zoloft. I'm not anxious anymore. I'm fine. Because that kid inevitably comes back in a few months saying, the Zoloft stopped working. I need more. It's like, well, yeah, because you had your anxiety, we kept it off, but it kept growing because we weren't doing any work on it. And we could raise the dose a few times, but not indefinitely. You need to have enough anxiety still showing for you to learn how to work on it. So the meds we're actually talking about, part of the thing on evaluation and all the rules of doing this is I need to tell you when things are off label, which, as I said, check it out. It's practically everything. When there's a number there, that is the age that it is okay. Now, notice, it does not mean that, like, if you got a kid who's 6, you have to give them Buspar, but not Prozac, because Buspar is magically safer for 6-year-olds than No, that just means that when they finally did a study, the youngest kid in that study was 6, and the youngest kid that they got for that study was 7. So that's all the FDA will let them say. Okay. A lot of these are off-label. Some of them are okay for another disorder, since generally anxiolytics are antidepressants. I mean, the daily ones. They were invented back when depression was all the rage. You know, if they were invented today, they'd be called anxiolytics, and we'd say, oh, and they also work for depression. But pretty much they all work on both. And so it might be that they did a study where they showed that Lexapro works on depression, but they haven't gotten around to studying it for anxiety. Obviously, we know that they work on both. So those would be the daily ones. The problem is you got to take it every single day, and it works gradually over a couple of weeks. It can be very, very subtle. Getting them to recognize that it actually did something can be an uphill battle. When we get into the middle bar, those are ones that could be either daily or the antihypertensives can be either daily or PRN. This is pointing out how the body and the brain talk to each other all the time. You know, if you take an antihypertensive so that your blood pressure doesn't jump up when you get startled, you don't feel as scared. You know, it's not that the fear drives the heart rate. It's pretty much the heart rate goes up first, and then your brain goes, oh, I must be afraid now. And so if we can stabilize it, that can help. In fact, prazosin is FDA approved with an indication of nightmares. Because if you take it at bedtime and your heart rate is more stable while you're asleep, it makes it harder for your brain to make scary pictures. So propranolol, you can take it just before you're going to do something scary. You can take it when you're already scared. It'll take a while for it to kick in. Or you can take it kind of throughout the day to keep it from happening. And if I get a person who's up to a certain baseline dose, there is a 24-hour version at that point. But again, you can take it just when you need it. And it is not cheating if you know you're going to be anxious to take it beforehand. I've gotten lots of people who really, really appreciate it for test anxiety. To which the propranolol people say, oh, but we don't know what it might do to recall when they're taking the test. To which all the anxious people say, seriously, do you have any idea what the anxiety is doing to my recall on this test? I mean, if the propranolol knocks off like 5 IQ points, I'm still miles ahead if I'm not, you know, sitting there thinking I'm going to die. It's the stage fright med. It's great for like if you've got an audition and you don't want to be drooling all over your violin, you take it. Now, the antihistamines, they are pretty PRN because the way they alleviate anxiety is by just making you too damn tired to feel scared. So it can be good for going to sleep. You know, some people, they use it during the day because it doesn't knock the, I mean, they might use it during the day because a nap would be way better than whatever's going on right now. But some people, it doesn't really knock them out, but it is going to be making them kind of be dragging around feeling sluggish. So it's not ideal, but it can be great for the bedtime, helping your brain settle. And And then there's the benzos. Those are the big rubber hammers. We do not like those in kids. We don't much like them in adults either. They are highly addictive. They shut down the anxiety. Anxiety streaming in, that slams the door. No anxiety coming in. The anxiety does pile up outside though. So the moment it wears off, they get all their anxiety plus an added dose of the anxiety that they've already managed to miss. So you get a nasty, nasty rebound anxiety. So if you've got a kid who came out of the hospital and they had like a PRN of Ativan, and they're like, oh, but they're not going to take it during the day at school. You really want to know if they took it before in order to go to school? Because that's a kid who could have a panic attack at lunchtime and no one knows why, including the kid, because nothing happened. It's just now suddenly the Ativan wore off and they are totally freaking out from it. So yeah, we don't really like the benzos because they are really hard to get off of. I've got a number of clients who are in their 60s and they're just never getting off of it because once the roots are grown, it's really hard. So when people are like, yeah, but what about the parents? How do we deal with those parents? Well, first of all, there's the issue of the parents not wanting to get them meds, and that's very frustrating. You know, they will gladly rush in and prevent the kids' triggers, which is going to make their anxiety worse. But the idea of giving them something that lets them actually face the triggers without feeling like they're going to die, somehow that's something that they don't want to do. Again, the propranolol, the antihypertensives are brilliant because they do not blunt your mind. Whatever the folks said about tests, they just keep the physical, from the neck down symptoms. So the kid can go ahead and be approaching what they're afraid of without feeling the fear, as opposed to just being too tired to deal with it at all. But when you want to feel judgy on the parents, and I'm right there with you, including being one of the parents, you got to recognize that there's nothing on the planet harder than having your kid have anxiety. Everything that you need to do for anxiety is 180 degrees opposite of parenting instincts. Anyone, if your kid's got a broken leg, most parents, I like to think most parents would say, if I could have their broken leg instead, I totally would. Anxiety, it wouldn't even hurt. If I do this thing that they're terrified of, it doesn't bother me at all. It's like I'm standing there wearing the oven mitts saying, no, you take the pan out of the oven. I'm just going to watch. No, it wouldn't hurt me at all, but I'm still going to watch you do it with your bare hands. Just because. It feels absolutely cruel to be doing the right thing for anxiety. But if you don't, it gets worse and worse. There's also the fact that there's a fair amount of genetics in here, and the parents might also have an anxiety disorder. You may actually notice that they had it first, and the kid might have mostly learned the anxiety disorder from what the parents are doing or creating a tense environment, rushing in to fix things before them. This is one thing that we are doing kind of across the board, is that we will rush in to stop anything that might go badly for the kid. And we're like, oh my God, don't touch that. And we do not make any distinction for the young child, whether I'm saying, oh my God, don't touch that, it could kill you, or oh my God, don't touch that, it could make a very inconvenient mess that I don't want to have to clean up. It's the same emotional content that people approach the kid with. And there's a link, I think, at the end of this to a TED Talk about helping kids be more resilient to anxiety and everything else by encouraging them to do more dangerous things. Let them go ahead and screw things up and then deal with it. Okay, going back. What you doing? I'm gonna fix this. It's broken. What you got? Crazy glue? Is that gonna go well? Probably not. Let them do it anyway. Are they gonna glue their fingers together? Almost certainly. But it's not life-threatening. It'll be very inconvenient. They will decide that maybe next time they don't want to do it this way. A day without thumbs is an education all its own. So let them go ahead and do things that they then need to deal with the consequences from it. And thus they'll realize that, oh yeah, there are things that suck enough to not do without it being, oh my God, it's going to kill me, which is what they've been getting taught. So there's also, if they have anxiety, it's a great chance for them to be able to say to the kid, I get it. I know how hard this is. You do your brave thing and I will be cheering for you. And then you can cheer for me while I do my brave thing, because we're both living in a world where no one thinks these are brave things at all, but they are. Whatever feelings you have about the parents, you want to recognize that they have a very hard job, harder than the school. They have the kid 24/7. And if anyone says, oh, but they don't have them while they're at school, then the kids are a problem. Has never had their kid need like a painful thing done in the doctor's office and known that being in the waiting room is not really necessarily any better than being next to the kid when they're in pain. Arguably, it's worse because when you're at work and the kid's at school, you don't know if they're okay. You pretty much worry that they aren't the whole time. And they got to keep the kid. The school has the kid for a year or a couple of years. They're going to have the kid for life. And as an added bonus, most of society will make it very clear to them that if their kid has an anxiety disorder, it's something they did. You screwed up somehow. Must be your fault that your kid is broken in this way. So recognizing how hard all that is, and they're not going to be able to do it a lot of the time. So what we want to do to help them be able to do it more, work together, find any common ground. Start with where do you see your kid in 5 years? They're like, well, they'll be in high school. They won't be your problem. Say, yeah, how are we going to do that if every day they start off with, yeah, you can't have 4th grade? Because every time you keep them home, that's kind of what you're saying. So let's help you with that. You know, recognize that whenever you rescue the kid, it does feel good, but that's not the good kind of good. Same as every time you give your kids nothing but ice cream all day, they're going to love you so much, but you know that that's not a good thing to do. So we want to help them establish the boundaries they need. They can make the school heavy. It can be, you know, I'd love to let you stay home, but the school called your attendance, it's really bad, so you got to go in. You know, as long as they're not going, yeah, I hate that school too, but you know, as long as they're not overdoing it. Recognize how the kid is pushing their buttons and causing them pain and set any barriers they can. How many of you have the kid texts mom to come and get them and mom shows up without even calling ahead? And next thing you know, the kid's getting dismissed. It is so hard to not just want to say, what on earth are you thinking? Why did you do that? But you want to recognize that from their point of view, it is as if they got a text from their kid saying, Mom, the school is on fire right now. It's getting really hot. I can barely breathe from the smoke. But the teacher just keeps teaching and everyone's pretending it's not. What would you do? You know, please save my life. Of course you're going to answer that. Of course you're not going to call ahead because you know the office is just going to say, don't be silly, the school's not on fire, because they don't know how much pain their kids in. And you do. It's so much easier if you didn't. So help them not know how much pain their kids in by like reinforcing the fact that things go through channels. Say, okay, yeah, if your kid really needs to come home, there is a process for them to be able to come home. They will be asking their teacher to see the nurse, and the nurse will be deciding and calling you. So let's get the cell phone out of there. You know, have a rule where they're going to have to drop off the cell phone at the office if they can. You know, encourage them to, if the kid texts them about anything, have an automatic answer be, go to the nurse, and then she'll call me, or go to guidance, and then they'll call me. And if they can't do that, because it might be too painful to see the text from their kid, say, okay, how can we help you by having them not have the phone? But what if they need to talk to me? Okay, how often do you think they need? Well, maybe once. Okay, how about one time during the day, they will go to the nurse and call you. You know, help give it a structure. You know, part of this is schools have really been mucking this up for a long time, in part to keep the really helicopter parents quiet by turning everyone into helicopter parents. You know, in the old days, you take your kid to kindergarten and you drop them off and you're like, I don't know if I can trust these people. But you don't have a choice. So you go home and you're in radio silence for a few hours and you come back and your kid's still alive. So you're like, okay, maybe they got this. They can manage this. From the kid's point of view, the kid can do the math too. The kid's like, wait a second. At home, if I got a problem, there's one adult, one kid, I like that ratio. Now I go to school and there's like 20 of us. And if I need something, there's only a couple adults over there. What am I going to do? Well, first, you're going to see if maybe you can fix it yourself. And then if you can't, you're going to ask the teacher. And then if the teacher can't, she's going to pass you on to the nurse. And then if the nurse can't, then she's going to call home. So it goes through these, but it starts with the kid figuring out if they can manage it themselves. Wouldn't it be nice if they were learning that more? Instead of it being, you show up on day one of kindergarten and everyone says, okay, new plan, you're going to go with them. You're going to stand right next to your kid all day. we would get that that is not healthy for anybody. That's what a lot of schools are doing with like having the teachers texting their parents updates throughout the day. Does your school have that kind of system? I've had somewhere where they've got a texting system for communication between the teacher and the parents, where the teachers are like sending them notes throughout the day in order to have lots of communication. I'm like, my God, could you make it clear to them that you're saying, you're right, maybe you can't trust us. Maybe you do. I mean, if you had a babysitter who called you every 10 minutes while you were out for the evening, you might think that you can't really trust them to take care of your kid. That's what a lot of schools are doing, is kind of setting up this improved communication and really getting mad at parents for like, I thought you were taking care of this. Well, why are you not being more involved? It's like, because I thought you were taking care of this, or the kid would take care of it. So we want to be communicating to everyone that the school can manage what comes up, especially the kid can manage what comes up, and anything they can't, there's a process that they can go through to access the help they need. We also want to recognize when you're talking to the parents that they are also probably in a world of pain maritally. It is virtually impossible for any two parents to hold out equally. You know, how much work is enough work in a day before you say, okay, yeah, you did enough. My daughter, as I said, she has OCD, and when it was bad, she could not touch the doorknob to open the door to leave in the morning. And so part of her morning routine was calling us to come and open the door so that she could catch the bus. It's kind of hard to break that sucker into steps because it's a door. It's either open or closed, you know? So really, the only intermediate steps would be for her to mentally rehearse having to open it herself. And the only way to do that is to really sell the idea that maybe today I'm not going to do it. And so I come and be like, really? What if you have to open it? You want me to open it? Well, why should I open it? And do that the whole time knowing that if I do that 1 second longer than her dad did yesterday, he's the one who loves her and I'm the mean bitch who's leaving her pain. It can shred a family. So you really, if you think it's hard to suggest to parents that their kid needs therapy, feel free to mention to them that having a marriage counselor might really be helpful as well, for them to have a more understanding, unified approach to what's going on with their kid. So moving into the subject of school refusal, okay? This slide is to point out that once you finish school, the world is bending over backwards to say that we can make a job flex and shift and change to fit your needs. Not so much for school. In the school setting, it'll be okay if the way your brain and body work doesn't fit what we're doing. We have to go through a very bureaucratic process of getting a 504 or getting an IEP, which very clearly communicates that there's something wrong with you, rather than we need to flex. And if that doesn't do it, well, you're going to go to another school, which is not really portrayed as, oh yes, and then there are schools that can fit all different. No, it's like, oh, then you got to go on the short bus over that special school. So there really isn't that sense. And so when kids can't navigate that, and going to school is really, really hard for them to do, we can't even come up with a good name for it, okay? You know, we used to call it school phobia. I was kind of okay with that one. Now they call it school refusal, which makes it sound like the kid's just stubborn, okay? And then people say, no, it's not that they're stubborn. You know, a truant is someone who won't go to school. A kid with anxiety, they can't go to school. I'm like, again, with can't, stop saying can't, because that's a very permanent sounding word. So we do want to step back and recognize, why is school so hard for them? Because we want to acknowledge that you're surrounding yourself with adults who have gone out of their way to choose voluntarily to continue to be in school well into adulthood. So we do tend to have an idea that school is kind of a place that we want to be because we chose it. Not so much for kids. Well, I recognize physical discomfort, very much part of it. Not just if they're getting beat up, but like if you've got anxiety and you get stomach aches when you're anxious and school makes you anxious, every day is like a really long car ride in a hot car. You know, it's like having motion sickness all day, every day. Or it can be that fidgety feeling of you want to move. And there's very little autonomy. I know we feel like the kids are just doing whatever they want a lot of the time, but you think about it, if you if your legs are feeling like you need to get up and move around, you get up and move around. If a kid feels like his legs need to get up and move around, he's got to come up with a plausible way to make that happen. Should he go and sharpen his pencil? No, he sharpened it just 5 minutes ago. He can't get away with that. Well, how about if he goes to the bathroom? Well, you have to raise your hand and, he's got to navigate this thing just to be able to move. Have you ever been on, remember plane rides? When we get on planes. You ever been on like a really long, like across an ocean or across the whole continent one, and you've got like that best seat, like it's all the way in the back and it's in the middle. And on both sides of you, you got really big people who kind of lean in as they fall asleep. And now you need to pee. That's what school can feel like for kids a lot. Like I'm stuck here and I cannot move. And how uncomfortable do I need to be for it to be worth coming up with a plausible reason to tell people to let me move? So the environment can also be threatening. It could be physically threatening if they're getting bullied. It could be very much socially threatening if they're being bullied or just feeling rejected. And their self-esteem. Lots of kids don't do academics that well, but they spend every day in a place where academics is the center of the universe. I mean, imagine if, who's a good singer? Raise your hand if you're a good singer. Okay, but from now on, and for the next 10, 15, forever, you get to go and spend 6 to 8 hours every day in opera school. And every day, in every way, every interaction is going to make it very clear to you that what makes you a worthwhile human being, what gives you any right to take up space on the planet is how well you sing. How's that going to feel? That's what school is for a lot of kids. Just this endless, and it goes on forever. I mean, there's very little reward that they can necessarily see, and it is going on forever. Telling a 6-year-old no, only about 16 more years is not helpful. And then there's the fact that other things will matter more to them sometimes, and we are very quick to say that doesn't matter because it's just a kid thing. You got a kid who, I can't find my teddy. Where's my teddy? Come on, we gotta get to school. You're gonna be late. But my teddy, I don't know. We'll find him when we get home. He's probably just under some clothes somewhere. Flip that. Got to go to school. Come on, we're going to school, Mom. Come on. But I don't know where your sister is. Where'd the toddler go? Oh, don't worry. I'm sure she's here somewhere. She's probably just under some clothes. Come on, we're going to be late to school. We would get that that's a problem. From the kid's point of view, his most important thing in the universe is missing, and he's supposed to just be okay with that for the next 6 hours. So recognizing. I don't know if we want to spend, I've been told there's just small group things to let people, talk to people other than me.
We talk to each other all day long.
So you don't want to do this? Cool. I don't either, because I hate small group things. I've done small group things.
This is a very, very.
I never get that 20 minutes back. And I know everyone spends 2 minutes on subject and then they talk about their weekend plans, So anyhow, everyone in your imagination, you're in small groups and you're going through and you're putting more of the pros and the cons, and you're doing it from the point of view of the child and the point of view of the adults projecting onto the child. Now that you've done that, oh, look, you did that. And now you've reported back to me and this is what you filled in for the adults. And this can be parents, but also school, okay? Going to school or doing the work when you're in school, because a lot of school avoidance is just sitting there and not actually doing the work. Is the fact that, hey, you get to be with your friends and it's important to do the work. Plus, when you don't go to school, well, I can't go to work. And we get to feel normal and we get to stop fighting about it. Now, if you drop down the pro of staying home, you also get to stop fighting about it. Pretty much just decisiveness is a pro in itself. But staying home, it might be a lot easier for them to just stay home than for you to have to go get them in the middle of the day. It can be a lot easier to call out from work than to have to leave work in the middle of the day. For some people, they feel better about the education that the kid can be getting at home. And there's that whole we're rescuing. And then sometimes they just have way too much fun together. I have one parent who's like, well, he was refusing, he was out on the roof, so obviously he couldn't go to school. So what do you do? Well, we watch movies. And I just kind of sat there after a few seconds. She's like, that wasn't the right answer, was it? And I'm like, yeah, not so much. But the cons, there's also cons to going. Okay, there is the question, maybe they have appendicitis, maybe they're really sick, or I'm going to have to leave work later, or I'm worried that the school can't manage their education, their emotions, the bullying, the whatever. And there's just the fact that it is so cruel to make them go someplace where they're in pain. But the downside is Mostly it comes down to everyone thinks we're failures. And so do we, because everything is lined up around, if your kid can't cut this, then it's just downhill from there. Now, from the kid's point of view, there's the pros of going, I could not come up with a lot of things up there, but basically they'll stop bothering me, I get to see my friends, and I won't fall behind so much. But the cons, it hurts, or I'll fail. You know, the kid who sits there and doesn't take the test, but now you got a 0. Well, I didn't study for it, but you got a 0. Even if, I mean, you could have gotten at least like a 60. Is there a 60 better than a 0? Hell no. A 0 is full of possibilities. A 60 is proof that you actually are a failure. So, yeah, there's the fact that everybody gets mad when they pick me up. And it could be that when I'm in school, I feel like an alien that everyone's making fun of. Whereas when I stay home, I feel so good. Especially when I get to play video games all day. Or no one is worrying about that anymore. You know, now they're all worried about this, which kind of sucks, but man, mom and dad aren't talking divorce so much anymore. Or now I finally matter more than dad's job or than my sibling that's doing all this. Finally, people care about me. You know, I've always been in this much pain, but now people seem to actually want to do something about it. Or I need to take care of something. If you've got a kid who never had school avoidance, all of a sudden, now they don't want to go to school. What changed? If nothing changed in the school, you know, there's no curriculum or social change, something changed at home. It could be that the kid's like, I gotta go see if mom's okay, or if the baby's okay. You know, and even though everyone could know that that's not their job, they cannot shake the fact that, well, you know, when I'm around, dad gets mom less, so I should just be around all the time. And there's just the fact that sometimes it's the only time people spend with them. But on the downside, everyone thinks I'm a loser. Now, things that people don't really think about is if you go to school and it's really hard, you get to feel proud of going to school. Mostly they don't think that because we don't tell them to feel proud. Mostly it's like, see, I told you it wasn't that bad. Now we can go back to pretending that you were normal all along, as opposed to, wow, excellent. You know, it also gives them the experience of I can do hard things. I can persevere when it hurts and I can get through it. The downside is any of the reasons that made it hard to go to school can get really solid. You know, if it's I go to school and I feel like I'm an idiot that can't do anything right, I go to school all the time and I prove to myself I'm an idiot that can't do anything right, and that becomes who I am as a person. Or it could be other things going on that just never get treated, never get addressed. The pros for staying out, they might get better education, better treatment, more safety at home. It is really hard whenever you got a kid who's working with a tutor, just getting them to understand that, yeah, one-on-one is a bit more efficient than 20-on-1. And therefore, yeah, you could do your whole day in 90 minutes. And yes, you still need to go for 6 hours to go through a normal school day. I had the same problem with nursing students. I'd have a clinical group of 6 and they'd be like, you should come and do the lecture. It's so much more clear. I'm like, yeah, because when you're talking to 80 people, it is a little bit harder to make it as tailor-made as to a smaller group. But the cons for staying out is that they learn that they are someone who can't do this. They have a lower pain threshold. They have less distress tolerance. It trains the body and the brain to double down on whatever got them to run away. If you've got a kid who's always queasy in school, and one day they're finally so queasy that they actually throw up, and that's the day they go home, they're going to throw up a lot sooner in the future. No, not on purpose. Okay, sometimes on purpose, but you know what I mean? Generally, it's that the brain's like, we need to get you to run away. What can we do to get you to run away? Oh, push that button. Ah, that got you to run away. Push that button there. Or it might be, oh, well, I'm worried about this and this and this. Oh, I'm really worried my mom might die. Now I'm going to go home. So now your brain's like, okay, so that's the magic thought that can get you to run away like I want you to. So it will double down on those things. So causes of school refusal are a combination. I mean, it's avoidant behavior that gets reinforced. Okay. It can be reinforced with negative reinforcement or positive reinforcement because we know what those are, right? Negative reinforcement is where you get rid of something bad. So I feel wretched and miserable at school. I stay home. I don't feel wretched and miserable. Yay, staying home works. Or it can be then getting away from danger, academic pressure, social pressure, so on. can also be positively reinforced. I get to sleep in, I get to play video games, I get people paying attention to me for the first time in my life. I get to feel like people care about the fact that I'm in pain when they've never cared before. Or it can be kind of a combination of those, but recognize that if it's brand new behavior, you want to look and see what thing changed. So the way to address it, start with, on the prevention side, having it be really clear what the expectations are. Do your best to have a cell phone policy that makes them not able to just be texting to go home. You know, at the very least, if they have their cell phone and a parent shows up to take the kid out, the office should have the routine that, okay, well, if we did not know that you were going to be picking him up, what is the reason why you're picking him up? If it's a medical reason, okay, you need to talk to the nurse. And then after the conversation with the nurse, then we'll call the kid down. So that, sorry to dump it on you guys, but you can have that conversation with the parents about the fact that, well, you know, if we go through channels, then the kid will learn more resilience and they'd still be able to go home if they really needed to. Wouldn't you like to not have to go to college with your child? Because, except some of the, I knew one parent who had the tracker on the daughter's phone and she'd call her, she wasn't in the dorm by 10 p.m. It's kind of creepy. Anyway, we want to make sure there's a positive school climate that is addressing whatever issues are coming up, because it doesn't have to be that this kid's got the same issue. It's if they saw bullying happening over there and now the kid has a totally different thing going on, but they think the school did not manage bullying well, they're going to think, okay, yeah, they're not going to manage this well either. So you want to make sure that there is a demonstrated visible, yes, when bad things happen, we actually can take care of it. You know, and anything that can keep from encouraging the parents to be like right there all the time. So then if they're out for 3 days, you call sooner if this has been a brewing thing that you've seen coming. Okay. And we need to remind people that call means you actually talk to another human being and not that you leave lots of voicemails. I mean, it counts, but not completely until you actually are talking to someone. And you're going to be assessing. And part of it is looking at all the different contributing factors. Not like, oh yeah, we know it's that one. There might be others. They're allowed to have more than one contributing factor. So looking at the student, looking at parents, looking at home, looking at the community, it might just be that getting to school is a real challenge in itself. So looking at all that, there's a lot of really good, useful forums on that website. And if you ask for links, which I sent you guys, has all those. So the interventions depend on what is causing it, just like everything in the world. Start getting old Maslow on them, okay? If they do not feel safe, it does not matter if you're talking about their future self-esteem or going to college, okay? So start with the basic root causes, safety, food, things like that. If you find that now their behavior is being rewarded, you want to get rid of those rewards, depending on the rewards. It's not that, okay, now my parents actually are paying attention to me for the first time in my life. Do not advise that the parents resume ignoring the child. That is not the right answer. What you want to do is have it be that they, if it is something that they are getting, that they ought to be getting, you encourage them to be getting it all the time. If it is something that they're getting that is no basic human right to video games, then you make it that they aren't getting it by staying home. And as much as possible, you have it not be this person is taking this away from you. You have it be built into the universe. You know, you play video games when you get home from school. Oh, so you're taking away my video games because I didn't go to school? No one's taking anything away. You play video games when you get home from school. If you don't go to school, then you don't get home from school. So maybe tomorrow you play video games when you get home from school and have it just be built into things. You want to have rewards for attending school, and routines are really, really, really important because a lot of the rewards are just the fact that they get to sleep in, stay in pajamas, and not do anything. So you make the day at home be as similar as possible to a day in school. Still getting up, still getting dressed. Now, this was something we totally crashed on with the lockdown of having it be that, no, you should still get up, get dressed, and not be lying in bed in your pajamas when you log in. You know, if you're working with a tutor, you do it not sitting in your bed. So if you're working online or working on homework, get up and go somewhere else in the house that you possibly can and have it be as structured as a, both because it'll make it less appealing to stay home, but also it'll make the transition back to school less of a culture shock. If it is avoidance, if they've got anxiety or fear of anything, then we're doing CBT with exposure, where you're breaking it into steps. Okay, you want to have a gradual re-exposure plan where they'd start going to school a little at a time, not, okay, you've been out for 3 weeks and now you got to go for 8 hours tomorrow. It's probably not going to be, I mean, think about it. If they had a physical problem, you would not necessarily say, okay, now tomorrow you got to go run in gym. So start at the end of the day if you can. I know that's logistically really, really hard for people, but if instead, if you're saying, okay, you're going to try and come for 60 minutes, 90 if you do well. Come in the morning and see how it goes. They'll come. If they leave at 60 minutes, if they leave at 90, it's like, leave at 60, oh, it's a shame you couldn't do 90. Oh, you could do 90, maybe you could have done more. It's basically, they go until they just can't anymore, and then they run away, and it reinforces the running away. If instead you come for the last hour of the day, they come and they leave because leaving is what's happening now. Look, everyone's doing it. And then you just move it earlier and earlier and earlier. That benefit of being able to say, but maybe they'd stay a little bit longer if it was a freaking, no, that's just setting them up for judgmentalism and failure. So better to lop that off and have it just be end of the day. Here's a sample of what you could do, where again, put it in the structure of the steps. And it might be that, you start with just being in the parking lot. It might be that you just come in the building. And you have each of these B steps that you're paying attention to. And you have them help fill them in. This isn't a gold standard. This, doesn't even allow for the beginning, the end of the day thing. But have the kid participate in filling in what goes in there. And if they're like, oh, that step to that step is too big, okay, let's break it down into smaller steps. Now, tips to help this work. One is you have one person who's the contact person for everybody regarding this kid. It doesn't have to be, it's any one staff person, just so that all the information is being consistently conveyed everywhere. And they can help the kid explain what their needs are to everyone, rather than the kid has to go and be explaining things to people. You schedule a meeting, you want to include everyone, including the kid. If the kid is not able to be participating in the meeting due to age or whatever, you contact them and say, someone's going to represent you in the meeting. What do you want them to be bringing to it? Convey to them that they are part of this and everyone should be collaborating on what the plan is. And the meeting ends with scheduling the next meeting. Do not leave it, okay, we got a plan and let us know if we need another meeting. Because then you might get a kid who does step one of the plan, it goes smoothly and they move in and live there. And that is now, well, for the rest of my life, I always get to, leave whenever I need to if I'm feeling stressed. So that's a great thing to get you able to come, but that's not a viable life choice for the rest of your life. That should be an interim step. Or they crash and burn and they fall off the radar and it takes forever before you can drag everyone back. If you plan a meeting for a week or two later and everyone shows up saying everything's on track, there's really nothing to talk about, that is amazing. That's wonderful. That's great. Don't feel bad about it. But you want to have the meeting already set up. Try to not have meetings be, it'll be planned when people get upset enough to feel like it's needed. That's having crisis reactive plans, not great when you're already working on a plan, on a situation. You want to reassure the kid about what they actually have to make up, which may or may not involve talking firmly to the academic world about what they should have to make up. Because way too often a kid might be, derailed and they're out for like a month and then they come back and they've got all the homework from when they were gone. They're hospitalized for a month. Well, I've been sending the homework, so why didn't it? It's not like they have to do it now. They should have been doing it all along. Okay, if they were in a coma for the month, you wouldn't be saying that. Recognize that if they were hospitalized for a month, their brain might have been a little bit busy doing other things. They need to be at grade level, which is what sucks about being a kid. That you can't just have the time to heal. Think about it. If your first year out, you broke an ankle and you're out for 2 months, imagine if that meant that for the rest of your life, you would never be on a par with other people who graduated when you did. That's kind of what happens to kids. If you can't, so yeah, they need to stay at grade level, but they don't necessarily need to hand in every scrap of homework. If a kid's been on crutches for 2 months and they go to gym, the gym teacher doesn't say, okay, well, we've been running half a mile a day, so you gotta go run like 30 miles right now. They wouldn't do that. So we need to have them not do it academically either. View it as if a kid was coming to the district halfway through the year, what would you do with them? You would not make them do the first half of the year's homework. Figure out what they do need to do and then schedule time during the day to do it. It's not really nice to say, okay, welcome back. You've got all the normal homework and all the extra homework, and you do all of it at home. So, and again, if part of the plan is that they're getting tutoring or online thing, try to have it on a schedule. And if possible, not even in the house, like at a library or something. I know nowadays that's a lot harder and impossible, but having it be as school mimicky as possible. We want to also make sure that everyone is on the same page, that this isn't just the kid refusing to go to school because they don't feel like going to school, but that there's a real thing going on here, and it's really hard and it's really painful, and they are working their butts off to try and overcome it, and they deserve to feel proud of that. Okay. Everyone needs to stay neutral and stop blaming. Trust me, everyone is to blame, so you can stop deciding who's to blame how much. You know, if something's falling off the rails and you're like, well, geez, should we blame the system or blame the parents or blame the school? Don't even bother, because probably it's everyone. So just move forward with not having who do we blame for getting here. And whatever progress they make, be enthusiastic, be proud of that. You know, acknowledge that they are doing something that's really, really hard. And the fact that you don't know how hard it is does not in any way make it not so hard. I mean, it's as if I'm looking at someone who's like solving an incredible mathematical thing. And I'm saying, well, I can add a column of numbers too. What's the big deal with you? The fact that my brain cannot begin to understand the process that their brain is going through does not mean that their brain is not going through a process. Now, during the pandemic, we may have noticed there's been a little bit of an increase in anxiety. Has anyone seen an increase in anxiety? And you had to look very much farther than like your mirror. Yeah, there's the fact that emotion to varying degrees for different people is a contagious thing. You know, one person gets upset. If they do it loudly enough, everybody gets upset. So anxiety is a very contagious emotion. It's like the emotional equivalent of scratching. You know, you start scratching, creasing, everyone's scratching. So, and anxiety comes down to you don't feel like you can control anything. Well, go figure, no one's been able to control anything for 2 freaking years, and we're really getting sick of that. So yeah, that is going to increase the incidence. There's also the fact that what we normally would do to address it, I ain't allowed to do. You know, it used to be you're washing your hands too much, just don't. Yeah, we don't want to wash their hands. You know, someone's like, oh, germs, they might kill me. It's like, well, good point. And so trying to figure out how to deal with it. You know, it used to be, okay, go to a concert to challenge that. And yeah, not so much. We're not saying stop washing your hands, go hang around more people, you know, go touch the dirty thing more. Yeah, we can't do that so much. But built into it, there's also the fact that a lot of the reactions people are having intrinsically exacerbated. Social polarization. Does anyone notice any social polarization? There seems to be like a bit of polarization going on. It really contributes to this because anxiety is very polarizing. It's like everything terrible or everything's fine. Or, you know, oh, don't be silly, that won't hurt you. Or yes, it's going to kill me. And having all of that mirrored by everything around you does not help. Everyone being told to just stay home for a couple months, not great for the kids who kind of wanted to stay home all the time. And we couldn't really do anything about giving them the magic words to be able to just push that veto button on going to school any day, you know? It's like if they're like, I think I got a sore throat. You know, we don't want to, you know, normally be like, yeah, no, go to school, let the nurse sort it out. Not that we want them to be sending sick kids to the ones who are doing that, but the anxious ones, we would say, go. But now we can't do that either. And then when someone is identified as needing treatment, they're like, nobody out there to treat them. There never was enough providers. It's just now suddenly people are noticing that. I mean, it used to be that there was like this relatively small group of people trying to fit into this way, way smaller area of providers. And now suddenly everybody's coming over and saying, wait, I want a seat on the bus too. And so now suddenly people are talking about what has always been a problem. And in the process, they're making it far, far worse. So what we can do, I hate it when I'm supposed to come up with solutions because God, I don't know what's going to fix anything these days. But target whatever policies you have in the school to science rather than emotions. You know, that same thing back with the cognitive distortions and helping challenge the dangerous thoughts is saying, let's look at the facts and have what you do be based on factual information rather than your gut reaction. Your gut reaction is going to be to run away. And so if something makes you feel scared, look and see what are the facts behind it, not just going by your gut reaction. You set the goals that match up with the current guidelines. So if you got someone who wants to wash their hands every 5 minutes all day long, say, okay, the actual guidelines are that you'd wash your hands, you know, at these times during the day. So that's the goal you're going towards. We're not saying don't wash your hands, and we're not saying meet that goal immediately, you know, because, but we'd say, okay, we're going to set up our stepwise thing with the goal being that you will be washing your hands less and for not as long. And congratulate everyone for doing difficult things, including the fact that everyone has been doing difficult things for the last 2 years, and it's really amazing. You know, for kids with anxiety, the pandemic has been either their worst nightmare or their greatest dream, or both. You know, it's like everything terrible that could happen is happening. Oh my God. But at the same time, my daughter, she's like, finally, people are washing their hands and giving me bubble space like they should have all along. So some of the people with anxiety are like, yes, but not in a healthy way. So, so we want to tell everyone, hey, if you went in a time machine, you know, turn to the anxious kid and say, if you went in a time machine and went back 1.5 years and said, you are going to have to survive this, you would have been absolutely certain you couldn't. And yet you did. You're way stronger than you thought you were. So be proud of that. So key points, we want to recognize that to deal with anxiety, you have to recognize that it's anxiety, figure out what's causing it, and decide what you're going to do, and then have the skills to actually make that work. It's complicated though, because the world is very much divided into people who either say, there's nothing scary there at all, just do it, there's no problem here, or the people saying, oh, you poor thing, here, let me open the door for you. So doesn't help. And no matter how much work you put into it, you almost never get any credit. At the same time, your body and your mind are actively undermining you constantly. It will double down on the somatic symptoms and the cognitive symptoms that succeed in getting you to run away. So there's all kinds of really useful websites that I sent you. And if that got sent to you in an electronic format, you can just click on it, which is always kind of nice. Let's see. I really like this bottom one. It was an article, not really a case study, I think it's not academic, but it was basically a newspaper article about a girl who was unable to go to school. And ultimately, she did not go to school. It was a success story article that did not define success as she finally goes to school and acts like a normal person. You know, in the end, it was that she was going to work with her mom every day. Her mom had a hair salon, and she spent half the day in the back on the computer doing all of her GED prep. And the other half the day, she's out front running the front desk and helping run the business. And so in a year, her plan is that she will get her GED and then decide then what kind of business she's going to go into and so on, and get on with having a perfectly successful adult life that did not have to depend on having succeeded in mainstream school. So it was just really cool to see that, because most of the time you see things as just they failed or they got back to school. So and let's see, there's lots of videos. You can see how my day went that day, right? Good TED Talk, an even better one, a really good one, and then I got on with other things. It's hard for people to get what anxiety really feels like and convey it. They did okay. The McLean TED Talk is really good because she starts off, I'll go ahead and tell you, the beginning is you're at like Thompson Fair or fair like that with your 4-year-old, and suddenly they disappear. And you are searching through the crowd trying to find them. And after about 15 minutes, you find them. How do you feel once you found them? How do you feel when someone's saying, well, come on, why are you still upset? It's like, no, your heart does not go back to baseline all that fast when you feel like your world is ending. And now imagine if almost at random, you get that feeling whenever anything startling happens in your life. Or you don't even know why you're getting it. It's just suddenly at random. So, and Yeah, and this is the one I was telling you about of telling kids to do super cool things. It's very cool. And then there's a podcast that was going through the things that people are scared of, like razor blades and candy and all those, and how they are totally not true, and where they came from, and how we really need to stop telling people that the world is out to kill them all the time. So as far as apps go, if someone wants to journal, but they kind of don't want to journal because they don't want to have to keep track of where the journal is and they never know what to say and they don't want to spend forever on it, Drawer is really cool because you tell it kind of what your issues are, and then it will offer you a prompt. It's on your phone, and you can write one sentence or 3 pages, whatever you want, in response to the prompt. So it's kind of a way to be able to have a daily check-in that's a little bit tailored to you and a little bit. Anti-stress is bizarre. It is fidget toys on your phone. It totally shouldn't work, but it does. Like, you know that thing with the pillow where it's got the sequins and you rub it one way, it's one color the other way? That should not be satisfying to do on your phone screen. It totally is. And I was doing one presentation, some people in the back, they downloaded it while I was talking, and I heard the muttering, well, there goes my thing. It's got, you poke the sploichy thing and it's just bizarre. Some of them have counters on them though, like the one where you're just clicking a pen cap. I don't know why. So it could be a little bit not so great for kids with OCD. And the T2 mood tracker is very neat because any symptom that could be on a slidey bar, it will let you assess that. You know, right now, how am I feeling? Stressed or calm or this or that? And it comes preloaded with anxiety, stress, and depression. The symptoms, not the actual experiences. And it tells you, I don't know if it prompts you or if you have to remember, but you do that. You can also, if you go into the settings, you can set up anything you want. So you could use it to be tracking anything. You could track ADHD symptoms or eating disorder symptoms or anything like that. Anything you could put on a slidey bar. But the neat thing is, at any point, you can then go back and it will give you a graph of like the last 2 weeks. Because if you want to say, how's this kid doing? It's really kind of hard to remember the last month. You usually end up caught up in talking about the last day. And so it's really, and also if you've got something that's like, oh, I'm terrible, I'm not getting any better. Be able to say, yeah, you had a setback, but look, overall, you are improving. You know, relapses happen all the time in anxiety. We used to think that was you're unlearning this. No, you're just trying to cover it up. One little trigger, and suddenly the kid's like, I'm bad as I ever was. I'm back to square one. I'll never get better. Say, no, you are not at square one. Because when you were at square one, square two was impossible. The fact that you've been to square two proves that you're not at square one anymore. You know how to get there. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna hurt. It's people are like, oh, you've done this before. No problem this time. No problem this time. Pain, agony, work, but less pain, slightly less hard. Stop telling people, keep doing it, it'll get easy. We gotta not lie to kids. Not gonna get easy, but it will get less hard. So, so now we've got 6 whole minutes for Q&A. Questions, comments, or examples.
I had one little analogy that I thought was maybe it's not accurate, but teaching, sitting with your anxiety, learning to sit with your anxiety, like teaching a baby, somebody under 1, to sleep in their own crib. You know, if you take them into your bed and you sleep with them, they never learn to soothe themselves.
I was at a conference and I went in the pediatric part of it, and it was getting packed. I'm like, the peds track never gets packed. I didn't realize that, I'm blanking on his name.
Ferber.
Dr. Ferber was speaking. He had such a palpable about the fact that his entire complex system of understanding was boiled down to just like cry. At one point, guy is like, how can you guarantee that letting the child continue to cry is not going to result in an increased chance of this, that, or the other thing in their 40s? And Ferber's like, I find it hard to imagine how you could design a study that control for all the variables in that question. Yeah, but actually what's going on with that, I mean, it's similar in that you have to, it's not just a self-soothing though. It's that your brain is hardwired to wake up repeatedly throughout the night. And it wants to be in the same place it was when it fell asleep before, because that's the brain getting habituated. I do this, then this, then this, then sleep. And if I do this, then this, then this, and I'm over here, the brain wakes up more going, but wait a second, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing when I fall asleep. And so it's not so much, I mean, and then they start crying and they want to sleep, but it's really a matter of whatever position they are in when they fall asleep, they will want to be in to fall back asleep when they inevitably wake up during the night. So that's why you want to put them down in the bed when they are still awake, so that they will have the falling asleep be when I'm lying here in this crib thing looking at the bars, so that when they wake up during the night, they're lying in this crib thing looking at the bars. Okay, that's where sleep happens. If instead sleep happens when I'm being held and rocked, then okay, I woke up, time for the holding rocking thing. Come on, where are you? Come on. So it's sort of self-soothing and sort of the brain being trained to how. I finally found out that was what the point of Goodnight Moon is. I always thought that was such a stupid book. But it's actually, you go and you survey the environment and you say goodnight to everything in the environment, and then you fall asleep. That way, when you wake up during the night, if you survey everything in the environment in the same order, you'll then fall asleep at the end of it. You know, that you can train your brain to, when this happens, I fall asleep. I do this, and then I fall asleep. There's an amazing podcast called Nothing Much Happens, Bedtime Stories for Grownups, where she tells a story, which nothing really happens. I mean, they're engaging, they're descriptive, but very little plot. And then she tells it again a second time. And her point is that you're trying to train your brain to, I think about this, I think about this, I think about this, and I fall asleep. And if you wake up during the night, you think about the elements of the story that you can remember. Then your brain will be like, last time I was thinking these thoughts, what did I do next? Oh, that's right, I fell asleep. Mind you, my brain's gotten so trained to her voice that I can't even get to the damn story, because the moment she starts talking, I fall asleep. I had someone here who wanted to ask a question, so if you want to, you can go ahead and just talk out loud, Jenny.
Hi, Julie. Thank
hear
you
you.
for this presentation.
Otherwise, you can type it.
Can you hear me?
If you got a question, you can either type it or say it out loud, because I did just say that you could unmute. Anyone else?
Julie, can you hear me? Julie.
I mean, I think what we're seeing district-wide is gigantic discrimination of the speeding between pre-K all the way to 12th grade. And then we see, I think staff are doing exceptionally well overall, but parents are also very discriminated.
Yeah.
And not that. And they're going to be very encoded throughout them, or it's just that it's been I don't know, this year
Well,
definitely not like anything I think.
I think that the idea that you mentioned about.
type your question then if you can't make it audible.
Yes, I think I'm noting that, like you said, the 1 to 2 person ratio, the 3 to 3 parents, and also when it comes to schools. I think this year, especially that it's such a long time of having being home and just having your parents,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden being thrown into situations where everybody's just as anxious. The kids in kindergarten are really stuck.
Yeah. Things that can help.
Well, they've never been to school, right? Well, right, some of them miss preschool because they've been good.
Or the preschools, they were separated instead of back to work together.
Right.
Yeah. One thing that can really help is giving structure to any place by having bookending rituals. If you start the class, the day, the whatever, in the same way and end in the same way, you'll have much more resilience for whatever unpredictability happens in between. And so having a very clear, this is how the day starts, can be very, very helpful. There's a site somewhere that had like various suggested sort of SEL rituals that you could build into the beginning of your day, whatever whatever you want, but having it be that when you come, so that when you're worried about going to school, it's like, the more you can have the beginning go on autopilot, you're way better prepared to deal with the middle. So if it's that, I guess I just can't get out of bed in the morning, because the moment I wake up, I'm like, if I get up, what am I going to do then? You know, and having the beginning of your day just be this gauntlet of decisions. You know, what should I wear? And what do I have for breakfast? And this and then, like, remove all the decisions you can and have it be that in the morning I wake up and I do A and B and C and D and E. And then by the time I'm done with E, then I can start saying, okay, now that I'm up, what am I going to do with my day? We'll make it go a lot smoother than having, and then the day starts and we don't know what we're doing. So same sort of thing, when you come into the classroom, you're like, I don't know what's going to be like coming to the classroom. Because, yeah, but you know that the moment you come in the classroom, this is what we do for the first 15 minutes. You can get through the door without worrying that the universe is going to surprise you.
And I think it's slowly getting better, and we're just seeing then like the heavy hitters still being super dysregulated, flipping desks, having really big reactions to very minute problems, and you know, and then trying to work through that. But that also has to stress out even the kids who are going along to school, just doing their thing.
Yeah. The hardest thing is when you got someone who's got an issue, you want them to be getting more towards the whatever else is doing, but you also don't want them to be facing everyone saying, what's wrong with you? This is easy.
Right.
You know, it's so hard to convey to people that someone is doing something that's hard without conveying information about them that you can't share for privacy reasons, but getting them to recognize that, hey, everyone's got different things going on, and this is hard for them, and they're doing really well. And yeah, it's frustrating because you'll have some people where they're not struggling, and therefore everyone who is struggling feels like there's something wrong with them. And at the same time, the people who aren't struggling feel like there's something wrong with them. You know, it's like that whole, I shouldn't complain because I haven't had as much pain as everyone else. You know, we had that all through COVID. You know, I don't have this pain, and therefore I can't complain about any of the pain I have. No, totally, you're totally allowed to complain about whatever pain you have. And recognize that whatever bothers you, and you get credit for dealing with it, whether it's something that bothers someone else or not. It's someone who's got a question of a kid with OCD and anxiety, and they're worried about getting sick. Not sure if they mean like puking in front of other kids or catching COVID. But he wants to avoid the classes where his regular teaching team isn't there, and he gets to go to the library and avoid those. I think the fact that the word avoid is right there in your answer kind of does say that that's not the best practice for this kid to get better at his anxiety. But again, you don't want to say, okay, no more library for you, get in there. You want to, stop and say, okay, what are some, at least some ways? I'm really, whenever a kid's like, okay, no, do none, it really tells the kid you cannot do stuff. It drives me up the wall when people talk about, well, this kid has accommodations because they've got whatever and therefore can't wear a mask. I'm like, masks should not be a 0 or 100% thing for those kids. It should be, okay, yeah, it's very hard for you to wear a mask. Could you maybe wear it for half an hour a day? That would be cool. That would be good. And the amount it will change transmission risk is very, very small. The amount it will change his sense of whether or not he can do anything in the universe is huge. If wearing a mask for half an hour is hard for him, but possible, he should be doing that. If you really want to figure out for every kid what is really hard but possible and get them to do that, rather than if you can't, if doing 100% is impossible, we're just going to have 0 be the answer. No, you got to find what is very hard but possible. When it comes to like presentations, say, okay, yeah, standing up in front of all of your peers and reading something might be overwhelming for most people, and therefore, but instead of saying, okay, no speech, go to a paper, you could instead say, okay, how about if you do a speech, but it's just for your friends? Or how about You do a speech, but it's just for me, or just for me and I'll turn away. Or, you know, you get them as close to what they're afraid of as possible and have them work that. So, yeah, and if you're scared of throwing up, again, the asking, and then what happens? And then what happens? And then what happens? You know, which feels totally backwards. It feels like, but that's just going to upset them more. You know, and I've had my daughter conversations where it's like, well, let's talk about this. I don't want to talk about it. I'll get upset. It's like, yeah, but you get less upset talking about it than doing it. So let's do that as step one, is having the conversation is the beginning of the exposure therapy, because now you have to actually be thinking about it and imagining it. And now we can come up with what are the plans of what's the worst thing that would happen and what can we do to make that less likely or less bad.